There are crimes that horrify. There are crimes that mystify. And then, very rarely, there are crimes that do both at once, that seize you by the throat and refuse to let go, that twist the mind into shapes it was never meant to hold. The affair of Edmund Lacey was such a crime. I've hesitated to set it down, not because the facts are uncertain. Hercule Poirot established them with his usual merciless precision, but because the truth, once known, is the kind that makes a man question everything he thought he understood about guilt, innocence, and the terrible lengths to which a human being will go when cornered by his own nature. But Poirot insisted. "Write it, Hastings," he said. "Write it exactly as it happened. Leave nothing out. For this case, it is not merely a puzzle solved. It is a warning about what a man becomes when he decides that the only enemy left to destroy is himself. I shall try." The Morning Post brought 3 items to our breakfast table at Whitehaven Mansions. A bill from my tailor, which I slid beneath my plate with the practiced discretion of a man who has perfected the art of financial denial. A catalogue of Belgian chocolates, which Poirot examined with more care than most people give to legal contracts. And a letter, thick cream envelope, black border, the handwriting of a solicitor. Poirot opened it with his ivory letter knife, that instrument he treated with more tenderness than most men show their children. "Curious," he murmured. "What is it?" He passed me the letter. It was from the firm of Blackwell, Hargreaves and Sutton, Lincoln's Inn Fields, and it read, "Dear Monsieur Poirot, we write on behalf of our late client, Mr. Edmund Lacey of Thornfield House, Oxfordshire. Mr. Lacey passed away on the evening of the 14th of this month under circumstances which, while officially recorded as suicide, occasion us considerable doubt. Mr. Lacey left specific instructions, sealed and dated 3 weeks prior to his death, that in the event of his demise, by whatever cause, you should be invited to Thornfield House to examine the circumstances. He enclosed a personal letter to you, which we attach unopened. The family have been informed of this arrangement. They are not, we must tell you candidly, enthusiastic. Nevertheless, our client's wishes are clear, and we are bound to honor them. We should be grateful if you would attend Thornfield House at your earliest convenience. A room will be prepared. Yours faithfully, Gerald Blackwell, senior partner." The personal letter, a single sheet folded inside, was in a different hand entirely. Cramped, uneven, the writing of a man under great pressure. It said, "Monsieur Poirot, by the time you read this, I shall be dead. I know how I will die because I have arranged it, but I have not arranged who will be blamed. That is another matter entirely, and it is why I need you. Someone in my household is going to murder me. They believe they are acting of their own volition. They are wrong. I have engineered the circumstances that will compel them to act. I am, in effect, the author of my own destruction. Why? Because I deserve it, and because the method of my death will reveal a truth that I lack the courage to speak while living. Come to Thornfield, examine the scene, question the family, and then, when you understand what I have done, judge me. I trust your judgment more than God's. For you, at least, deal in evidence." Edmund Lacey. I set the letter down. My toast had gone cold. Good Lord. Poirot had not moved. His coffee sat untouched. His eyes were fixed on some point beyond the room. That interior distance he retreated to when something had seized the full power of his extraordinary mind. "A man who arranges his own murder," he said quietly. "Not suicide, not an accident. Murder, committed by another, but orchestrated by the victim himself. Is that even possible? It is more than possible, Hastings. It is an art form. The question is not whether it can be done, but why a man would choose to die in such a way." He picked up his coffee at last. "This is not a suicide note. It is a confession, written in advance by a man who wished to control the narrative of his own death, a man who turned his own murder into a message. A message to whom? To the killer, to the family, to us. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Pack Hastings, Oxfordshire, today. The countryside south of Oxford is gentle. Rolling chalk hills, beech woods turning bronze in the late autumn light, villages of honey-colored stone nestled in valleys where the mist collects like milk in a saucer. Thornfield House sat in the crook of one such valley, visible from a mile off, a Georgian manor of considerable ambition, its symmetrical facade presiding over formal gardens now past their prime. The drive was lined with chestnuts dropping their fruit like small grenades upon the gravel. A gardener in a cloth cap straightened as we passed, his expression suggesting that motorcar visitors were rarely bearers of good news. We were admitted by a housekeeper named Mrs. Poole, a woman of granitic composure whose eyes, red-rimmed and raw, told a different story from her starched manner. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, you're expected. The family is in the drawing room." The family proved to be 4 people, arranged about the room with the studied casualness of a tableau designed to suggest normality and failing entirely. There was Vivian Lacey, the widow, a striking woman in her early 40s, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of bone structure that would remain handsome into old age. She wore black, naturally, but wore it like armor rather than mourning. Her handshake was dry and firm. Beside her, standing at the window with a glass he was pretending not to drink from, was Gerald Lacey, Edmund's younger brother, 35, perhaps. Fair where Edmund had evidently been dark, with a boyish face going soft at the jaw and restless, darting eyes. He shook our hands with excessive warmth. "Monsieur Poirot, thank God. Someone with sense at last. This whole business has been, well, you'll see." In the corner armchair sat an older woman, Margaret Lacey, the brother's mother, 70, steely, erect as a fence post. She did not rise. She regarded Poirot over reading spectacles with the appraising look of someone who has seen too much of life to be impressed by celebrity. "So you're the detective my son apparently trusted more than his own family. Madame, your son chose to trust Hercule Poirot with the truth. That is not the same as distrusting his family. It amounts to the same thing. The 4th person was not a Lacey at all." Dr. Simon Hale occupied the sofa nearest the fire, a lean, tanned man of 50, with the quiet authority of a physician comfortable in crisis. He was, Vivian explained, the family doctor and Edmund's oldest friend. "I signed the death certificate," Hale said before Poirot could ask. "Suicide. Gunshot wound to the right temple. The revolver was in his hand. The study door was locked from inside. The key was in his pocket." He delivered these facts with clinical detachment, but something in his voice, a tightness around the edges, suggested that clinical detachment was costing him dearly. "A locked room," Poirot said. "The door locked from within, the weapon in the dead man's hand. The coroner would have no difficulty." "The coroner ruled suicide yesterday," Vivian said. "The inquest was brief. Edmund had been unwell." "Unwell in what way?" Vivian and Dr. Hale exchanged a glance. Brief, loaded, the kind of communication that happens between people who have discussed a subject extensively and agreed upon a version. "Depression," Hale said. "I'd been treating Edmund for 6 months. Melancholia, insomnia, episodes of what I can only describe as profound despair. He withdrew from his business interests, stopped seeing friends, became obsessed with his papers, spent hours in his study with the door locked. He was impossible," Gerald added, and then looked immediately ashamed. "I mean, he was difficult to reach. We tried, all of us tried." Margaret Lacey said nothing. She watched Poirot as a hawk watches a field mouse. "And yet," Poirot said, "despite the locked door, the weapon in his hand, and the medical history of depression, despite all this, your solicitors expressed doubt, and your husband, Madame Lacey, wrote to me before his death requesting my investigation, which suggests that what appears obvious may not be true. Silence. May I see the study? Edmund Lacey's study occupied the ground floor of the east wing. It was a room designed for a man who took himself seriously. Mahogany bookshelves from floor to ceiling, a partner's desk the size of a small country, leather chairs of the kind that whisper money without raising their voice. The curtains were heavy brocade. The carpet was Persian, good but not ostentatious. The smell hit me first. Cordite, metallic and sharp, still lingering 4 days after the event. And beneath it, something else. A sweetness, faintly chemical, that I could not identify. The desk chair had been removed. The carpet beneath bore a dark stain, blood dried to the color of old rust. On the desk surface, a chalked outline showed where the revolver had been found. Inspector Marsh of the Oxfordshire Constabulary had been summoned at Poirot's request, a stolid, methodical man who radiated the particular patience of a rural policeman accustomed to livestock disputes. Monsieur Poirot, I've read about you, of course. He consulted his notebook with the deliberation of a man who trusts paper more than memory. Edmund Lacey, aged 46. Found dead in this room at approximately 10:15 on the evening of the 14th. Gunshot wound to the right temple. The weapon was a Webley service revolver registered to the deceased. 1 round discharged. The door. Locked from the inside. A mortise lock. The key was found in the deceased's trouser pocket. The windows? 2. Both latched from inside. The curtains were drawn. Any other means of entry? Marsh shook his head. The room is entirely self-contained. No connecting doors, no dumbwaiter, no servant's passage. The chimney is too narrow for a child, let alone a grown man. I had my constable check. And the person who discovered the body? Mrs. Vivian Lacey. She heard the shot at approximately 10 o'clock. Came downstairs and found the study door locked. Called out, no answer. She telephoned Dr. Hale, who arrived within 15 minutes. Together with the butler, a man named Carstairs. They broke down the door. Broke it down. It's solid oak, 2 inches thick. Took Carstairs and the doctor both, shoulder to shoulder. The lock gave way. The frame splintered. Marsh indicated the door, which bore the raw wounds of forced entry. They found Mr. Lacey in his chair, slumped to the right, revolver on the floor beside his right hand. Poirot moved through the room with that peculiar combination of delicacy and thoroughness that characterized his method. He examined the lock, or rather, what remained of it. He inspected the window latches. He crouched to study the bloodstain. He opened desk drawers and peered inside without touching their contents. The revolver, he said. Where is it now? At the station, Exhibit A, though we don't anticipate a trial. Fingerprints? Only the deceased's. On the grip, the trigger, the barrel, consistent with self-infliction. Powder burns? Present. On the right hand and the right temple. Close contact. Poirot stood at the desk, his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room with narrowed eyes. A perfect sealed room, he murmured. A textbook suicide. Everything in order. Everything where it should be. And that, Inspector, is what troubles me. Marsh frowned. Troubles you? Perfection troubles me, Inspector. Real life is messy. A man who shoots himself in a moment of despair does not arrange the scene with the neatness of a stage manager. He does not ensure that every detail supports the desired conclusion. Only a man who is thinking clearly, or a man who has help, achieves such tidiness. He bent suddenly, his nose almost touching the desk surface. And this? What is this? I leaned in. On the green leather blotter, barely visible, was a faint circular mark. A ring, perhaps 2 inches in diameter, as though a glass or bottle had been set down and removed. Something stood here recently, Poirot said. A container of some kind. round-bottomed. The leather is slightly discolored within the ring. Moisture or a chemical agent. Marsh peered at it without enthusiasm. Could be anything. A whiskey glass. There is no whiskey glass in the room, Inspector. No glass of any kind. That detail, the absent glass, settled into the investigation like a stone dropped into deep water. Something was here, Poirot repeated, and someone removed it, before the body was discovered or after. He moved to the fireplace. The grate was cold, but not empty. Among the grey ash, Poirot's tweezers extracted a twisted curl of paper, burned but not entirely consumed. He held it to the light. I could make out a few words in what appeared to be typed text. Policy number 47829. In the event of death by any cause other than... An insurance document? Poirot said. Partially burned. Interesting that a man about to kill himself would trouble to burn his insurance papers first. Destroying evidence of the policy, I suggested. If he didn't want the family to claim. Or destroying evidence that the policy existed at all. There is a difference, Hastings. He pocketed the fragment. Inspector, I should like to examine the rest of the house, interview the household staff, and review any correspondence Mr. Lacey received in the weeks before his death. You think it's murder? Marsh said flatly. I think it is something, Inspector, and the something is not what it appears. The interviews began after lunch. A grim meal served by Mrs. Poole with the mechanical precision of a woman holding herself together through routine. Poirot chose the morning room for his conversations. It was lighter than the study, less burdened with atmosphere, and it offered a clear view of the garden. Useful, Poirot said, because people who lie often glance toward open spaces, seeking escape. Gerald Lacey arrived first, his bonhomie already showing cracks. He sat in the offered chair like a man settling into a dentist's seat, outwardly game, inwardly rigid. Ask me anything, open book, nothing to hide. Then let us begin with the thing you are hiding, Poirot said pleasantly. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I beg your pardon. You are in financial difficulty, monsieur. Your shoes are expensive but resoled, the mark of a man maintaining appearances beyond his means. Your watch is pawned and replaced with a cheaper model. The tan line on your wrist is wider than the current strap, and your motor car, which I observed in the drive, bears the plates of a hire company. Gerald went very still. I do not say these things to embarrass you, Poirot continued gently. I say them because in a case of death, money is always relevant. Your brother was wealthy. You are not. The question is unavoidable. I didn't kill Edmund. Gerald's voice had lost its polish. Yes, I'm in debt. Badly. Investments went wrong. Horses, mostly, if I'm honest. Stupid, I know. Edmund knew. He'd been helping financially. Loans. Substantial ones. He never asked for repayment. He just... Gerald stared at his hands. He looked at me with that expression of his. Patient, disappointed. Like a father who's watched his child fail an examination. I hated that look. And if your brother died, his will splits everything between Vivian and mother. I receive a specific bequest of £20,000 and the cottage on the estate. £20,000. Enough to clear your debts? Nearly, not quite. But the insurance. If there is a life insurance policy... Gerald's head came up sharply. What insurance? You did not know your brother held a life insurance policy? Edmund never mentioned insurance. He considered it morbid. Said a man who plans for his own death invites it. Poirot made a note. Tell me about the evening of the 14th. Where were you? In my room. Upstairs. East wing. I'd had rather a lot of wine at dinner. We all had. Edmund was in one of his moods. Barely spoke. Left the table early. Vivian tried to draw him out, but he shook her off. Gerald reached for a cigarette. Thought better of it. Put it back. I heard the shot. Must have been about 10. I didn't think, one doesn't think gunshot, does one? I thought a door had slammed. It was Vivian's scream that got me moving. You went downstairs. Found Vivian in the hall, white as paper. She said the study door was locked. Edmund wasn't answering. We telephoned Hale. He told us to break the door down. You helped break it? No. Carstairs, the butler, and Hale did it. I stood behind like a useless idiot. And when the door opened, Gerald's face contracted. For the first time, I believed the emotion was genuine. He was in his chair. The gun was on the floor. There was blood. A great deal of blood. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Poirot studied him. One more question, monsieur. Your brother's revolver, the Webley, where was it normally kept? In the desk drawer, top right. Edmund always kept it loaded, a habit from his time overseas. He'd done business in West Africa, came back with a permanent unease about security. And the key to the desk drawer? Edmund kept it on his key ring, along with the study key, both found on his person. So I understand. Poirot dismissed him. Gerald departed with the air of a man who has survived something he'd been dreading, unaware that survival is not the same as innocence. Vivian Lacey entered the morning room as though mounting a stage. She sat with perfect posture, arranged her hands in her lap, and regarded Poirot with an expression that combined cooperation with absolute control. Monsieur Poirot, I understand you must ask questions. I'll answer honestly, though I want you to know that I consider this exercise unnecessary. My husband killed himself. The coroner agrees. I see no reason to prolong the family's suffering. And yet your husband, in a letter written 3 weeks before his death, specifically requested my presence. Something moved behind her eyes. Edmund was unwell. You cannot give equal weight to the wishes of a man in the grip of melancholia. On the contrary, madame, a man who writes to his solicitor with precise instructions, who anticipates the manner of his death, who provides a detailed personal letter. This is not the act of a man whose judgment is impaired. It is the act of a man thinking with terrible clarity. Vivian's composure held, but I saw the effort it cost, a tightening at the corners of her mouth, a slight flare of the nostrils. You found the body, Poirot continued. Tell me precisely what happened. I was in the drawing room, reading. I heard a sound, a sharp crack. At first I thought it came from outside. Then I realized it had come from the study. You were certain of the direction? The study is directly beneath the drawing room. The sound traveled through the floor. What did you do? I went downstairs. The study door was closed. I knocked, called out. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. I called again, louder. Nothing. And then? I telephoned Simon, Dr. Hale. He lives in the village, 5 minutes by car. He arrived quickly. He and Carstairs broke down the door. You did not attempt to find another way in? Through the windows, perhaps? The curtains were drawn. I couldn't see inside, and the windows, they faced the garden terrace. I would have had to go outside, round the house, in the dark. For the first time, her voice wavered. I was frightened, Monsieur Poirot. I knew what that sound was. I knew even before we opened the door. You knew your husband kept a loaded revolver? Everyone knew. He made no secret of it. Madame Lacey, I must ask you something delicate. Poirot paused. The pause itself was a technique. I had seen him use it many times. It created a space that the interviewee felt compelled to fill. But Vivian did not fill it. She waited, perfectly still. Your marriage, Poirot said. Was it a happy one? It was a marriage, monsieur. They are rarely one thing or another. Your husband was depressed, withdrawn, locked in his study for hours, unresponsive to your efforts. This must have been isolating. It was. And Dr. Hale, He visited frequently. He was treating my husband. He was also, I think, a comfort to you. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. Vivian's eyes hardened. If you are implying, I imply nothing, madame. I observe. Dr. Hale arrived within 15 minutes of your telephone call on the night of the 14th. His home is 5 minutes from here. That leaves 10 minutes unaccounted for, unless he was already en route when you called. He drives carefully, or he was already close to the house. The silence that followed was a living thing. I could feel it pressing against the walls. Simon Hale is a friend of this family, Vivian said at last, each word measured and cold. He has been Edmund's friend for 30 years. He has been my support during the most difficult period of my life. I will not dignify your suggestion with a response. Then I shall not make the suggestion, madam. I shall merely record the facts. Poirot inclined his head. One more thing. Your husband's insurance. Did you know he held a life insurance policy? I did not. You're certain? Edmund handled all financial matters. He did not discuss them with me. Thank you, madame. That will be all for now. She left without looking back. In the doorway, she passed Dr. Hale, who was waiting to enter. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. No more. But in that fraction, I saw everything Vivian had denied. Simon Hale sat in the chair Vivian had vacated and crossed his legs with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to uncomfortable conversations. Monsieur Poirot, I imagine you have questions about Edmund's state of mind. I have questions about many things, Doctor. Let us begin with the body. You examined it at the scene? I did. Gunshot wound to the right temple. Contact wound. Stellate tearing of the skin consistent with the muzzle being pressed against the head. Powder stippling on the hand. The revolver had discharged 1 round. Death was effectively instantaneous. The position of the body? Seated in the desk chair, slumped to the right. The arm was hanging, the right arm, with the revolver on the floor just beneath the hand. Consistent with the weapon falling from a relaxed grip after death. You broke down the door. Carstairs and I took 3 attempts. Solid oak. And the room. Was anything out of place? Anything that struck you as unusual? Hale considered. The curtains were drawn, which was normal for Edmund in the evening. The desk lamp was on. His papers were in order. Unusually so, actually. Edmund's desk was normally a battlefield. That evening it was immaculate, as though he had tidied up before the act. That's how I interpreted it. Men who plan suicide often set their affairs in order first. Did he leave a note? No note was found. You searched? Thoroughly. The police searched as well. No note. Poirot leaned forward. That is strange, is it not? A man who writes to his solicitor, who writes to Hercule Poirot, who burns insurance documents in his fireplace. This man is a communicator. He wishes to be understood, and yet he leaves no final message for his wife, his brother, his mother. Hale shifted. Depression can be unpredictable. Perhaps. Or perhaps the note existed and was removed. By whom? The room was locked. By someone who was present before the door was locked, or by someone who entered the room after the door was broken down in the confusion of discovery. Hale's jaw tightened. I can assure you, Monsieur Poirot, that nothing was removed in my presence. And before your presence, Doctor, you arrived 15 minutes after the telephone call. Vivian was alone in the house with the locked study for those 15 minutes. The door was locked. She couldn't have entered. Could she not? A determined woman with access to a spare key. There was no spare key. Edmund was meticulous about security. Poirot changed direction with the abruptness that always unsettled his subjects. The insurance policy, Doctor. Did Edmund discuss it with you? A flicker, quick, controlled, but unmistakable. Insurance. A life insurance policy, evidence of which was found partially burned in the study fireplace. Edmund never mentioned insurance to me. And yet, as his physician, You would have been required to provide a medical examination for any such policy. The insurer would have demanded it. The silence stretched. Hale uncrossed his legs and recrossed them. Yes. About 8 months ago, Edmund asked me to conduct a medical for an insurance application. I assumed it was routine, business protection, that sort of thing. The amount? I don't recall. The insurer? Provincial Mutual, I believe. Poirot made a careful note. And the beneficiary? I wouldn't know. That's between Edmund and the company. Of course. Poirot's tone was silk over steel. One final question, Doctor. On the night of the 14th at approximately 10 o'clock, where were you? At home. In my sitting room. Reading. Alone? My housekeeper had retired for the night. And when the telephone rang, Vivian's call, you drove directly here. Yes. Arriving at approximately 10:15. Approximately. A 5-minute drive, and yet 15 minutes elapsed. You drove slowly? I may have taken a moment to collect my bag. One doesn't rush out without equipment. No, Poirot agreed. One doesn't. Poirot spent the remainder of the afternoon in Edmund Lacey's study. I accompanied him, though my contribution consisted largely of holding things and trying not to sneeze from the dust he disturbed. He began with the lock. The mortise had been destroyed by the forced entry, but the mechanism remained attached to the doorframe. Poirot examined it with a jeweler's loupe, turning the remnants of the bolt this way and that. A 5-lever mortise, he said. High quality. Brahma or equivalent. Not the sort of lock one picks with a hairpin. So it really was locked from inside. The mechanism is consistent with that, yes. The bolt was fully extended when the door was forced. The key was found in the dead man's pocket. Everything says sealed room. He set the lock down and moved to the windows. 2 sash windows, each secured by a brass catch that dropped into a slotted plate. Both shut tight. No wire, no thread, no mechanism by which these latches could be manipulated from outside, Poirot confirmed. And the paint, see here, Hastings. The paint on the window frame is undisturbed. These windows have not been opened in weeks. Then no one came in or out except through the door, which was locked from inside. Suicide, then? It has to be. Poirot gave me the look he reserved for my most spectacular failures of imagination. Hastings, you disappoint me. The locked room is the oldest trick in the criminal's repertoire. It is designed to make us say exactly what you have just said. It has to be. But the whole purpose of the exercise is to make the impossible appear inevitable. He returned to the desk. The circular mark on the blotter absorbed his attention for a long time. He measured its diameter with a small ruler. He sniffed the discoloration within it. He even, to my bewilderment, touched it with the tip of his tongue. Chemical, he said. An adhesive residue. Something was affixed here. Glued temporarily. The adhesive has degraded, leaving this ghost. Affixed to the desk? What sort of thing? Something round, approximately 2 inches across, with a flat bottom. He was thinking aloud now, his fingers drumming. A small container, a bottle, perhaps, or a timing device. A timing device? Poirot did not answer. He had turned his attention to the chimney. The fireplace was ornamental, a small Victorian insert with a narrow flue. He crouched, peered upward, and thrust his arm into the darkness. Hastings. His voice was muffled, echoic. There is something lodged here. He withdrew his arm. In his hand, coated in soot, was a small glass bottle, cylindrical, approximately 2 inches in diameter, the kind used for pharmaceutical preparations. It was empty, but when Poirot uncorked it and held it to the light, a thin residue coated the interior. Something dark, viscous. This was on the desk, he said, placed upon the blotter. The adhesive held it in position. At some point, it fell, or was knocked, into the fireplace and lodged in the chimney breast. What was in it? Poirot sniffed the residue with the caution of a man who has encountered poisons before. Chloral hydrate, I think. Or something similar. A sedative. A sedative? But the cause of death was a gunshot. Precisely, Hastings. And that is the question, is it not? Why does a man who intends to shoot himself also require a sedative? He held the bottle up to the window light. Through the soot, a label was partially visible. He cleaned it with his handkerchief. Dr. S. Hale. For Mr. E. Lacey, chloral hydrate, 20 grains. As directed. Prescribed by Dr. Hale, I said. For insomnia, presumably. Presumably. But 20 grains is not a standard sleeping draught, Hastings. 20 grains of chloral hydrate is enough to render a man unconscious. And an unconscious man... Poirot's voice went very quiet. An unconscious man cannot pull a trigger. The implication hung in the air between us like gun smoke. Someone drugged him, I said. Drugged him, placed the revolver against his temple, and fired. And then locked the door from inside, with the key, and departed by a means we have not yet discovered. Poirot's eyes were blazing. The sealed room is a lie, Hastings, a magnificent, carefully constructed lie, and somewhere in this house there is a mechanism, a method, by which the killer escaped a locked room and left a dead man holding the gun. It came to Poirot at 3 a.m. I know this because he woke me at 3:15 by rapping on my bedroom door with his knuckle. A precise, economical knock that was nonetheless impossible to ignore. Hastings, come. I found him in the study, wearing his dressing gown and slippers, his mustache slightly lopsided from having been slept upon. A sight so rare I almost forgot the circumstances. He was standing at the door, or rather, at the door frame, where the ruined lock still hung. Look, he said, and pointed. At first I saw nothing. The door frame was oak, scarred from the forced entry, its inner edge splintered. But Poirot directed my attention to the strike plate, the metal housing into which the bolt extended when locked. The screws? He said. I bent closer. The strike plate was held by 4 screws. 3 were ordinary brass flatheads, seated firmly in the wood and green with age. The 4th, the bottom screw, was different, slightly shinier, a fractionally different thread, and the wood around it was not snug but loose, as though the screw had been removed and replaced. This screw has been changed, I said. Not merely changed. Observe. Poirot removed it with a penknife. It turned easily, offering no resistance. Beneath it, the hole was deeper than necessary, bored out, widened, and in the widened hole, wedged at the back, was a tiny coil of wire. Poirot extracted it with his tweezers. A length of fine piano wire, perhaps 18 inches, looped at one end. The mechanism, he breathed, elegant, simple, devastating. He reconstructed it for me, step by patient step. The killer loosens the bottom screw of the strike plate, just this one, in advance. On the night of the murder, he enters the study, drugs Edmund with chloral hydrate, stages the shooting. Then he threads this wire through the loosened screw hole, loops it around the bolt of the lock, and exits the room, closing the door behind him. The door is closed but not locked, I said, following. Correct. From the corridor, he pulls the wire. The bolt slides into the strike plate. The door is now locked. He then pulls the wire free through the enlarged screw hole, reinserts the screw from the corridor side. It is designed to be tightened from either side, you see, and walks away, leaving a locked room with the key inside. The key was placed in Edmund's pocket beforehand. The killer thought of everything, except the screw. Except the screw, the one detail that could not be made to match the others. A fresh screw in an old plate, a hole bored wider than necessary, and a fragment of wire that fell into the cavity rather than being fully withdrawn. I stared at the tiny mechanism, so simple, so lethal in its ingenuity. But who? Who had the skill to do this? Poirot straightened. Someone with patience, someone with mechanical knowledge, someone who visited this house regularly and had access to the study door. Someone who knew that Edmund Lacey was depressed, that he kept a loaded revolver, that the household would accept suicide without question. Hale. Hale is a possibility. He's a surgeon. His hands are precise, accustomed to fine work. He visited frequently. He prescribed the chloral hydrate. And the insurance policy, if Vivian is the beneficiary, and Hale and Vivian are. Do not leap, Hastings. We gather, we do not leap. But his eyes told me the same thought had occurred to him long before it had occurred to me. The following morning, Poirot paid a visit to the offices of Provincial Mutual Insurance in Oxford. The manager, a Mr. Chiswick, received him with the nervous deference of a man who has read about Poirot in the newspapers and hopes never to feature in such a story himself. The policy on Mr. Edmund Lacey, Poirot said. I should like to see it. Chiswick consulted his files. Policy number 47829, taken out 8 months ago. Life assurance, £100,000. I nearly choked. £100,000 was a fortune. Enough to clear Gerald's debts 10 times over, enough to set Vivian up for life. The beneficiary? Poirot asked. Mrs. Vivian Lacey. And the terms, specifically regarding the cause of death. Chiswick adjusted his spectacles. Standard exclusion for suicide within the first 2 years of the policy. If Mr. Lacey took his own life within 24 months of inception, the policy would be void. Void, Poirot repeated. No payment. Correct. But if Mr. Lacey were murdered, killed by another person, the policy would pay in full. Yes. Murder, accident, natural causes, all covered. Only suicide is excluded. Poirot sat back. The pieces were assembling themselves with the terrible inevitability of a well-made clock. Tell me, Mr. Chiswick, the medical examination. It was conducted by Dr. Simon Hale. That is correct. And the application itself? Who arranged it? Chiswick consulted the file again. The application was submitted by Mr. Lacey personally. All signatures are his. Did anything about the application strike you as unusual? Only the amount. £100,000 is considerable for a private individual. We conducted additional checks, financial references, business interests, everything was in order. And since Mr. Lacey's death, Mrs. Lacey's solicitors have submitted a claim. It is currently under review. A claim for £100,000, contingent upon the cause of death being anything other than suicide. Correct. And the official cause of death is suicide, which is why the claim is under review. Chiswick looked distinctly uncomfortable. If the ruling stands, the policy is void. But if someone were to prove it was murder, if a detective of reputation were to demonstrate that Edmund Lacey did not kill himself, then the policy would pay. Chiswick said nothing. He did not need to. In the motor car on the way back, Poirot sat in absolute silence. His eyes were closed. His fingers made small movements in the air as though conducting an invisible orchestra. Edmund Lacey took out a policy that pays only if he's murdered, I said. Then he wrote to you, a famous detective, asking you to investigate his death. He wanted you to prove it was murder. Yes, because he wanted Vivian to collect the insurance. Yes. Then his letter was the truth. He arranged his own murder. He engineered the circumstances that would compel someone to kill him. And he brought in Hercule Poirot to prove it was murder, so that the insurance would pay. That is the surface of it, Hastings. The first layer. There's more. There is always more. Poirot opened his eyes. Consider. Edmund tells us he engineered his own murder. He tells us someone in the household will be compelled to act. He does not name the killer. Why? Because he didn't know who would do it? Or because naming them would defeat the purpose? If Poirot knows the killer's name in advance, the murder might be prevented. Edmund did not want prevention. He wanted investigation, after the fact. But that means, I struggled with the logic. He sacrificed himself. Deliberately. Knowing someone would kill him, knowing the insurance would pay. He committed suicide by proxy. The man who murdered himself, Poirot whispered. That is the title he chose for his own death. But Hastings, the little grey cells, they are not satisfied. Because there is a question Edmund's letter does not answer. Which question? The question of who benefits, truly benefits, from proving it murder. Vivian receives the insurance, yes. But if the death is proven murder, then there must be a murderer. And that murderer goes to the gallows. A chill ran down my spine. Edmund did not merely arrange his own death, Poirot said, his voice grave. He arranged someone else's destruction. The question is, whose, and whether that destruction is justice or revenge. Poirot assembled them that evening. Not in the drawing room. He chose the study itself. The blood had been cleaned, the carpet replaced, but the room retained its atmosphere. The bookshelves, the heavy desk, the repaired door with its fresh screws, everything served as a reminder. Vivian protested. Margaret Lacey refused outright, then changed her mind. Gerald came willingly, with the desperate eagerness of a man who wants the ordeal finished. Dr. Hale arrived last, his expression guarded. Inspector Marsh stood by the door. Poirot stood behind the desk, Edmund's desk, and for a moment the resemblance to a judge was unmistakable. 4 days ago, he began, Edmund Lacey was found dead in this room. The door was locked. A revolver was in his hand. The coroner ruled suicide. He paused. The coroner was wrong. No one spoke. Edmund Lacey was murdered. He was drugged with chloral hydrate, a sedative prescribed by Dr. Hale and placed in his evening drink. While unconscious, he was shot through the right temple. The revolver was pressed to his skin to simulate self-infliction. The killer then locked the room using a mechanism I have demonstrated to Inspector Marsh, a length of piano wire threaded through a modified strike plate, allowing the door bolt to be engaged from outside. Marsh nodded confirmation. The killer walked away. The room appeared sealed. The death appeared self-inflicted, a perfect crime, or so it was intended. Vivian's face was white. Gerald gripped the arms of his chair. Margaret sat with the implacable stillness of a woman who has been waiting for something terrible and is almost relieved it has arrived. Hale's expression was stone. But Edmund anticipated this murder. Poirot continued. He knew it was coming. He had, in fact, provoked it, deliberately, systematically, over a period of months. He took out a life insurance policy for £100,000, naming his wife as beneficiary. He feigned depression to establish a credible basis for suicide. He locked himself in his study for hours, cultivating the image of a man on the edge. And 3 weeks before his death, he wrote to me, Hercule Poirot, instructing me to investigate. He opened the letter and read Edmund's words aloud. Someone in my household is going to murder me. They believe they are acting of their own volition. They are wrong. I've engineered the circumstances that will compel them to act. Edmund Lacey was not a victim in the ordinary sense, Poirot said. He was the architect of his own destruction. He designed his death the way a playwright designs a final act. Every character positioned, every motivation in place, every exit blocked, except the one that leads to the truth. What truth? Vivian demanded. Her composure had fractured. What truth could possibly be worth dying for? Poirot looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Hale. The truth, madame, that your husband had been slowly poisoned for 18 months, and that the person poisoning him was Dr. Simon Hale. The room erupted. Gerald shouted. Margaret Lacey gripped the arm of her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. Vivian stared at Hale as though seeing him for the first time. And Hale did not move, did not speak, did not deny. Edmund discovered it 6 months ago, Poirot continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Not through medical tests. He did not trust doctors for obvious reasons, but through his own research. He was a methodical man, an intelligent man. When his symptoms persisted despite treatment, he began to study them. He recognized the pattern of chronic arsenic poisoning, the gastric disturbances, the nerve pain in his extremities, the progressive weakness that Dr. Hale attributed to depression. "You can't prove that," Hale said. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Edmund preserved samples, hair clippings, nail parings, stored in dated envelopes in a safety deposit box at his bank. Inspector Marsh retrieved them this morning. They have been sent for analysis. The results will show elevated arsenic levels consistent with repeated small doses administered over many months. Hale said nothing. "The motive was double," Poirot said. "You wish to inherit, not directly, but through Vivian. Your affair with Mrs. Lacey is not a secret to anyone in this room except, perhaps, Gerald." Gerald's face confirmed that it was indeed a secret to him. With Edmund dead of apparent natural causes, the slow wasting that arsenic produces so convincingly, Vivian would inherit the estate. You would marry her. The fortune would be yours. A leisurely murder, committed over months, invisible to everyone. "But Edmund discovered it," I said. Edmund discovered it, and instead of going to the police, instead of confronting Hale, he devised something far more extraordinary. He decided to use his own death to expose the man who was already killing him. The room was absolutely silent. He took out the insurance policy, £100,000, payable only if his death was murder, void if suicide. He feigned deeper depression, giving Hale confidence that the slow poisoning was working. He withdrew from society, locked himself in his study, cultivated every symptom of suicidal despair. "And then he wrote to you," Vivian whispered. "And then he wrote to me. He knew that once he was dead, Hale would stage the scene to look like suicide. Because suicide, not murder, was what Hale needed the world to believe. If the death was suicide, the insurance would be void, yes, but Hale would escape prosecution. A depressed man takes his own life. No investigation, no questions. But Edmund didn't want Hale to escape. No, he wanted Hale exposed. So he created a contradiction, a death that looked like suicide but was, in fact, murder. And he invited the one man in England capable of proving the difference. Poirot turned to Hale. "You murdered Edmund Lacey on the night of the 14th. You arrived at this house before Vivian's telephone call, not after. You let yourself in through the kitchen door, using the spare key that Mrs. Poole keeps beneath the boot scraper. You entered the study while Edmund was still conscious. He admitted you willingly, because he was expecting you." "He was expecting me," Hale said. His voice had changed. The professional calm had drained away, leaving something raw, something almost bewildered. "He invited me. Said he wanted to discuss his treatment. When I arrived, there was a glass of brandy waiting. He said, 'Drink with me, Simon, one last time.' I thought he was being dramatic. He had placed chloral hydrate in his own glass. Not yours. His." The room drew a collective breath. "He drugged himself," Hale said, and the wonder in his voice was terrible. "He sat across from me, drank the brandy, and within minutes his head was on the desk, and I—" He stopped. "You saw the opportunity." Poirot's voice held no anger, only the implacable gentleness he reserved for the moment of truth. An unconscious man, a loaded revolver in the desk drawer, a history of depression that would explain everything. You had been planning to escalate the arsenic, a final, fatal dose. But here was something cleaner. Something that would end it in a moment, with no trace of poison to find. "I took the revolver," Hale said. His eyes were focused on some point far beyond the room. "I pressed it to his temple. He didn't move. He didn't feel anything. I told myself it was mercy. He was dying anyway. The arsenic was in his bones, his blood. Months of suffering ahead. I was ending it. You were ending the risk of discovery. Yes. The word fell from him like a stone. Yes, that too. You fired the shot. You placed the revolver in his hand. You locked the door using the mechanism you had prepared weeks earlier. The piano wire, the modified strike plate. You drove home. And 15 minutes later, when Vivian called, you drove back. The perfect alibi, summoned to the scene by the victim's own wife. He knew, Hale said. Sitting across from me, drinking that brandy, looking at me with those eyes, he knew what I would do. He'd laid it all out. The gun, the sedative, the locked door. All I had to do was follow the path he'd made. He made you his executioner, Poirot said. And in doing so, he ensured that the truth about your poisoning, the months of arsenic, the slow, cowardly murder you had been committing, would be exposed not by a confession or a laboratory test, but by the very act you committed to conceal it. Hale put his face in his hands. The man who murdered himself, I murmured. Not quite, Hastings. Poirot's voice was weary, a weariness I rarely heard from him. Edmund Lacey did not murder himself. He arranged for the man who was already murdering him to finish the job, and to be caught doing it. It is not suicide. It is not murder in the conventional sense. It is something else entirely. Something for which the law has no adequate word. Inspector Marsh stepped forward. Dr. Simon Hale, I am arresting you for the murder of Edmund Lacey and for administering a noxious substance with intent to endanger life. Hale stood without resistance. At the door he paused. He could have gone to the police, he said. He could have had me arrested for the poisoning. Why didn't he? Poirot met his gaze. Because arrest was not enough. Edmund Lacey did not want you punished by the system. He wanted you to punish yourself, to commit the act that would destroy you in the most complete way possible. Not prison, Doctor. The noose. He wanted you to earn the noose with your own hands. Hale's face crumpled. They led him away. The house was quiet. Margaret Lacey had retired without a word. Gerald had gone to be violently sick in the downstairs lavatory. An understandable reaction, given the evening's revelations. Inspector Marsh had departed with his prisoner. Vivian Lacey remained. She stood at the window of the drawing room, looking out at the garden where the last of the autumn leaves were falling in the moonlight. Poirot and I stood behind her, uncertain whether to speak or withdraw. Did he love me? She asked without turning round. Poirot considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I believe he did, madame, in his own way, a way that was proud, stubborn, and ultimately self-destructive. He knew about Simon. He knew about the poisoning. Whether he knew about the affair, I am not certain. But I think perhaps he did. I think it informed his plan. Vivian turned. Her eyes were dry but devastated. A landscape after a fire, everything familiar made unrecognizable. The insurance, she said. £100,000. He did that for me? For you and against you. The money ensures your comfort, but its collection requires proving murder, which means a trial, a scandal, the exposure of your affair with the man who killed your husband. Edmund gave you a fortune and a punishment in the same gesture. Vivian closed her eyes. He always was thorough. Madame, one question I must ask. The chloral hydrate. Edmund drugged himself, but the glass in which he dissolved it, the brandy glass, was not found in the room. I know. It was removed. Not by Dr. Hale. He had no reason to take a glass. Not by Edmund. He was unconscious. Someone else entered the room after the murder and before the door was discovered to be locked. Vivian opened her eyes. The kitchen door, she said quietly. There is a service corridor. It connects the kitchen to the study through a pantry. Edmund sealed it off years ago, or so everyone believed. The plaster was thin. I could hear him sometimes, through the wall, pacing. You knew about the corridor. I knew about it. And on the night Edmund died, I heard the shot. And then, 10 minutes later, I heard the kitchen door close. I went to the pantry. The plaster panel had been pushed aside. The corridor was open. You entered the study. Yes. Edmund was... She swallowed. I saw him, and I saw the glass on the desk, and I saw the bottle, the chloral hydrate. I knew what it meant. I knew he had drugged himself. I took the glass and the bottle. I removed them. Why? Because if the police found chloral hydrate at the scene, they would investigate further. They might discover the arsenic. They might discover everything, and Edmund would be proved right. He would get what he wanted. Simon would hang. Poirot studied her. You protected Dr. Hale. I loved him. The words were barely audible. God help me, I still loved him. Even knowing what he had done, even knowing that Edmund had orchestrated this entire nightmare to destroy him. I loved him, and I tried to save him. By removing the evidence that would prove murder. If it was suicide, clean, simple suicide, Simon would be safe. The insurance would be void, yes. But Simon would be free. Poirot was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was grave but not unkind. You chose love over money, madame, over justice, over your dead husband's final wish. I cannot say whether that is noble or catastrophic. Perhaps it is both. He reached into his pocket and produced the glass bottle. The one he had found in the chimney, the one Vivian had tried to hide, but which had rolled from the desk into the fireplace during her hasty removal. You missed this, he said. Vivian stared at it. Then it was all for nothing. Not nothing, madame. You showed me something the evidence alone could not. The depth of the entanglement. The fact that even the victim's plan had unforeseen consequences. Edmund arranged every detail except the one he could not control. Your heart. London had never looked so welcome. The grey streets, the familiar fog, the reassuring hum of a city that does not care about the anguish of individuals. All of it felt like a warm coat after the cold of Thornfield. Poirot arranged his chocolates on the sitting-room table with the attention of a man restoring order to a disordered universe. I sat opposite, nursing a whiskey I felt I had thoroughly earned. I keep thinking about Edmund, I said. Sitting in that chair, drinking the drugged brandy, knowing what Hale would do, watching it come. It is the part that troubles me also, Hastings. Poirot set down a truffle with precision. Not the mechanics, the wire, the lock, the insurance. Those are clever, ingenious even. But the will required. To sit across from the man who has been slowly killing you, to hand him the means to finish the job, and to trust that your death will achieve what your life could not. That is something beyond cleverness. That is a kind of terrible faith. Faith in you. Faith in the truth. I was merely the instrument. He selected a chocolate, examined it, and returned it to the box in favor of another. Edmund Lacey believed that the truth, once set in motion, would find its own path. He was correct, but the path included Vivian's interference, the missing glass, the concealed corridor. He could not predict everything. No one can. Will she be charged? Vivian? For removing evidence? Inspector Marsh will decide. But I think not. She acted from love, not malice. And the evidence she removed, the glass, the bottle, I recovered independently. Her interference delayed the truth, but did not destroy it. And the insurance? The policy will pay. Edmund's death was murder. Vivian will receive £100,000. Poirot's voice was dry. She will also receive the knowledge that her husband died to expose the man she loved, and that the fortune he left her is stained with the blood of both. A poisoned gift, précisément. He bit into his chocolate and chewed thoughtfully. There is an irony, Hastings, that Edmund would have appreciated. He spent 18 months being slowly poisoned by a man he trusted, and his revenge was to turn that trust into a weapon to make Hale's own treachery the instrument of his exposure. The victim became the prosecutor. The dying man dictated the terms of his own death. He set down the chocolate box and regarded me with those sharp green eyes. "You asked me once, Hastings, whether a man could murder himself. The answer, I now believe, is this. A man can arrange his own murder. He can provoke it, design it, stage manage it with the precision of a theatrical production. But in the end, someone else must pull the trigger, and that someone, however manipulated, however maneuvered, bears the guilt. So Edmund is innocent. Edmund is dead. The question of his innocence is between him and whatever judge awaits beyond. But I will say this." Poirot's expression grew somber. "A man who uses his own death as a weapon is not innocent. He is merely a different kind of guilty." He rose, brushed a crumb from his waistcoat, and moved to the bookshelf where his Montaigne waited. "Come, Hastings. We have spent too long among the dead. Let us read something about the living." I finished my whiskey. Outside, London went about its business, cabs honking, newsboys calling, the great indifferent machinery of a city that absorbs tragedy and carries on. Somewhere in Oxfordshire, a house stood empty, its study door repaired, its secrets finally spoken. And somewhere in a police cell, a doctor sat with his head in his hands, replaying a moment he could not undo. The weight of a revolver, the silence of an unconscious man, the click of a trigger that sealed two fates with a single bullet. The man who murdered himself. Edmund Lacey had achieved the impossible. He had been both the victim and the author of the crime, both the corpse and the detective. He had reached from beyond the grave and closed the case himself, leaving Hercule Poirot, for once, not as the solver of the mystery, but as the instrument through which a dead man's will was carried out. It was, Poirot later admitted, the only case in which the victim had been cleverer than he was. He said it with a smile. But I noticed he did not say it twice.